I forgot to turn on the recorder here. How about signs like what Moses did? How about parting the Jordan River, maybe? Or, bringing on plagues onto God's enemies. For the recording, this is Luke chapter 11, verses 29 and following here. There was a guy some 15 years or so after Jesus' death named Theudas, Theudas, that was there in Judea, and he called himself the Messiah. He got a lot of people to believe in him. And he promised that he would go down to the Jordan River and he would part it, like when the Hebrews were going to take the promised land. Because that would be the type of sign they would be expecting to see, something really big. He failed at that miracle, and apparently the Romans dealt with him a bit later on, so he came to nothing. But Jesus has come in, and Jesus says this generation is wicked. They want a sign. And it's like, what has he been doing? He's doing signs probably daily, and there's this healing and whatnot, and powerful things. Yet this wasn't the type of miracles they were looking for. They wanted something more spectacular, I'm sure. And so, we talked about this last time. The Queen of the South was the Queen of Sheba down in probably Ethiopia, came a long way to meet Solomon and talk to him about how wise he was and what his understanding was. And Jesus is saying, if we compare this generation to her, she who worked really hard to come and see Jesus, or Solomon, I guess, in order to know what it is that he had to say, what Solomon had to say. And yet here's Jesus coming through, and people are not happy with the type of signs he has. Jonah preached to the people of Nineveh, and they repented. Jonah didn't have any signs at all, except that of him getting thrown in the belly of the big fish and coming back out okay. I don't know if they saw that or not. And they believed what Jonah had to say. They repented. And so the people listening to Jesus at the time weren't having anything of it. Apparently, they wanted more. So it's sad to see their lack of faith that he was asking them to have. Verse 33, no one after lighting a lamp puts it away in a cellar nor under a basket, but on the lampstand so that those who enter may see the light. The eye is the lamp of your body. When your eye is clear, your whole body is also full of light. But when it is bad, your body is also full of darkness. Then watch out that the light in you is not darkness. If therefore your whole body is full of light with no dark part in it, it will be wholly illumined as when the lamp illumines you with its rays. What is Jesus talking about here?
Who or what?
He's saying nice things. Pardon?
Who or what did you say? I mean,
what
who's he talking
is Jesus saying? Verses 33 through 36 here, where Jesus is talking about lights and lampstands and darkness and your body and illumination. What is he talking about?
I think your attitude, maybe your attitude or your perceptions and projections out into the world.
Okay.
I don't know. I mean.
Okay. What is he? Probably, but more specifically, what kinds of attitudes and projections?
Ones of
Anyone else?
love, of agape love? I don't know.
Can't you have
How
phileo
about,
love too? Oh, no.
how
I'm
about
pastoring you.
truth and knowledge, but more likely faith?
Okay.
Do you hide your faith under a basket, or should you show your faith?
Okay. How we express what we know and what we believe in, and what we stand for. We can be knowledgeable about a lot of things. We can know the truth about a lot of things. We can be faithful about a lot of things.
I agree with
Maybe,
Kirby.
Truth.
I think of having faith, but don't let anybody know you've got it. And
okay,
I had an instance where we told a member of the church that somebody he was doing business with was a member of the church. He was just amazed by their business attitude, finding out that this person was a Christian. It didn't match his
okay,
business.
If you
okay,
start down a path of darkness and you have no light, you're going to wander off the path. You're going to remain in darkness. You're not going to be an example for anyone else. You're going to be down in the dirt with everyone. But if you have that light on that path and you can see where you're going, then you're going to be able to be better prepared to be an example to others of what Jesus wants us to be.
okay. There
So
we
could you
go.
call all that the truth, just truth? The light is the
Yes.
truth.
Yes. But you all are, these are good things. Y'all are saying the right stuff there. What I'm looking for, Jack touched on it specifically though, when he talked about for Jesus, or faith in Jesus, or knowledge in Jesus, and our trust in him, and our understanding and our faith. And the idea being, like Marilyn was saying, there are those who don't live that life. Jesus is there, but he's not very visible. You can't tell that that person is a Christian by the way they live their life. And so when Jesus says, don't put your light under a basket or in the cellar, put it up on a lampstand, put it high where people can see it. Now, we're going to talk some more about that here in the next few verses, about how you go about doing that. But in particular, don't hide who you are. And we'll touch some more on that as we go into this, further in this chapter and the next. More thoughts about that?
So he's saying profess your faith or profess your beliefs. Don't
I think more than that, I think he's saying live your beliefs.
live.
You know,
Okay.
we want to say, we want to like that thing on Facebook, click like if you love Jesus. Well, that's great. You did your duty today. Now go and live it. Go and show Christ's attitude towards others. Yes.
Yes, let it show. I mean, the way you conduct yourself with everyone, whether they're evil, bad, good, brothers, sisters, or enemies, the way you conduct yourself in those situations, people are watching us to see how we handle it. And I think letting the light shine is we let the word and Christ and the spirit that works within us help us conduct ourselves on a daily basis.
If someone causes you to stumble and, and I don't know, I mean, like, I encountered something today, and I encountered something, and it angered me, and it upset me, and it hurt my feelings, and everything negative and darkness, and I didn't handle it well. So what's my best thing to, I'm sorry about my dogs. What's the best thing to do? Pray about it. But I mean, this was a Christian person that I was speaking with, and they were definitely not being, and they, were like strong, supposedly strong Christians. And they really just blew my mind with the way they
Sure.
interacted with me.
Others can always disappoint us. When he says there in verse 36, if therefore your whole body is full of light with no dark part, well, that's not it, 35, then watch out that the light in you is not darkness. Jack is right. We're always on display. We're always being watched, and others see our example. It needs to be a good example. Now, when others wrong us, and they will, you in the sense that no one is completely without sin except our Lord, and we are all going to fail at times. If we have the attitude that Christ had, I am certain that there were those who disappointed him, who offended him and hurt him. Yet it did not change his life. It did not change his reactions in return. He always showed kindness. I say always. We're going to look at a section here where we may want to scratch our heads a little bit about that. But Jesus did not return evil for evil. So yes, Kim, I understand. There are people who will disappoint us and shock us. Like that business practice guy that Marilyn was talking about, just not very good people who will say they are followers of Christ, but they don't live it in their lives. So yes, pray about it. Yes, learn from it. Use it as an example of how not to be. More thoughts?
Gracias.
De nada. Verse 37. Now, when he had spoken, a Pharisee asked him to have lunch with him, and he went in and reclined at the table. Almost directly to your point, Kim, there were times when the Pharisees were not very nice to Jesus. And yet here he goes and he accepts a lunch with one, and probably a group of Pharisees. When the Pharisees saw it, Jesus reclining at the table, he was surprised that he had not first ceremonially washed before the meal. This was a practice of being clean in the law of Moses style, in the sense that when under the law of Moses you were not to touch dead things or other things that had been called unclean, because its uncleanliness would move over to you. And this was not a hygiene sort of thing, as in washing the dirt, but a thing of being ceremoniously pure or clean. Jesus didn't do that. Do you think Jesus needed to do that? Would be my first question. Was it necessary for Jesus to go through this purification ritual? Decidedly hygiene. Not.
Yeah, but like for hygiene and for things like that.
That's not what this was about.
Pardon me?
It's more
That's not
religious.
what this was about. Yes, it's clean.
More religious rituals of the Jews.
Yes, it was from the law of Moses. In Leviticus and Numbers and Deuteronomy, it talks about things that make you unclean, and things that in turn make you clean once again. And so you were not to come into the presence of the tabernacle or the temple if you were ritually unclean. And so the Jews, the Pharisees in particular, the rabbis through the years, put a really sharp point on this idea about cleanliness. Let me read you a little bit of something here.
Yeah, the Muslims do that too. They do, I think they call it ablutions.
Ablutions, yeah. They got it from the Jews, by the way. This was considered a great sin for Jesus not to do this amongst the Pharisees. They had special stone jars that they kept separate from other things because they didn't want the uncleanliness to move from one thing to another. And then, I got a gnat buzzing around here. Then they began by pouring water over the hands, starting at the fingers and running down towards the wrist. Then each palm was cleansed by rubbing the fist of the other hand into it. Water was poured over the hands again, this time from the wrist towards the fingers. A really strict Jew would do this not only before every meal, but also between each course throughout the meal. The rabbis were deadly serious about this, saying that bread eaten with unwashed hands was no better than dung. A rabbi who once failed to do this was considered excommunicated. They kicked him out of the synagogue. Another rabbi was imprisoned by the Romans and used his ration of water for ceremonial cleansing instead of drinking, nearly dying of thirst, but he was regarded as a great hero. So to give a little bit of context to what was going on here with why were they upset with Jesus? Well, he didn't follow their rules, and they were quite upset about it.
Scott,
Yes,
I
sir.
have a question. All these, I know we've talked in the past about the great number of laws that the Pharisees came up, I would say rules and guidelines. These washings, are these things that were in that original guideline or the original laws that were handed down about how they washed and when and all that? Or some of these things that they're talking about practice that they added later for appearance's sake?
The original practice goes back to the law of Moses, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. It talked about how you became clean, but we talk about the 10 Commandments and how really there were the Jews didn't want to miss any commandments. There were a lot more. They numbered them and found there's 613 laws. How many tablets did that take? And then they would ask questions. It's like, you can't work on the Sabbath. Well, maybe you can, something falls or whatever. Can you pick it up? Well, you got to go to a neighbor's house for Sabbath dinner. How far can you go? So there were questions about what constituted work. So they started making up rules saying, well, this is allowed, but that's not. Observant Jews today, practicing Jews today will, some of them will, on a Sabbath, they will come outside their house if they see you, a Gentile, walking by and say, can you help me for just a minute? I know someone that a woman, a Jewish woman came out and asked her to help. She went inside, would you turn on that light switch over there for me? I'm not allowed to do it because it's the Sabbath. And the Jews weren't allowed to work because that would be like making fire, but they could persuade a Gentile to do it. I mean, it became rather silly before long. Jesus is having none of this here. And he says, verse 39, but the Lord said to him, now you Pharisees clean the outside of the cup and of the platter, but inside of you, you are full of robbery and wickedness. You foolish ones, did not he who made the outside make the inside also? but give that which is within as charity, then all things are clean to you. But woe to you, Pharisees, for you pay tithe of mint and rue and every kind of garden herb, and yet disregard justice and the love of God. But these are the things you should have done without neglecting the others. Now, Jesus says, you're doing all of this outside for show. You're doing it to give the appearance of being righteous or holy, and you're neglecting more important things. He apparently had observed them taking their spices that they grew in the garden and say, well, we're supposed to give a tenth of all we have. So here's my crop of oregano, and I'm going to give a tenth of that for charity. And look how holy I am for doing so. Jesus says, and you're not concerned about justice. You're not concerned about the love of God. Verse 43, woe to you, Pharisees, for you love the chief seats in the synagogues and the respectful greetings in the marketplaces. They like to get up front. They like to be seen. They like for others to notice them. And look what a good Jew I am, a good child of Moses, good child of Abraham by sitting up front. And they wanted to be noticed. Woe to you, verse 44, for you are like concealed tombs, and the people who walk over them are unaware of it. One of the laws in the book of Numbers talked about a way you could become unclean, and that was if you walked over a grave, even if you didn't know where the grave was. And it was what the Jews would do was they would put whitewash on those tombs so it would be obvious where they were and they could kind of step around them. Jesus, to be this way, I don't know how harsh the reaction was against Jesus not washing his hands. And they were surprised, it said, that there in the earlier verse. When Jesus does this, woe to you, he's following in the footsteps of some Old Testament prophets. In Isaiah chapter 5 and Habakkuk 2, those particular prophets would pronounce woe upon the king of Judah, the king of Assyria, the king of Nineveh, whichever, or woe to the priest for not being righteous, not following the law, not taking care of people, or judges who came out with unfair rulings and that sort of thing. They would go and let them. The prophets would just sock it to them with these woe to you. Jesus is doing the same thing here with these Pharisees. And they would have known that because they were steeped in the teachings. They knew the prophets, knew them very well. Questions about this to this point? Verse 44.
Scott?
Yes.
Whenever I was in OC and took world religions, one woman, he had me read a book to do a final paper on about Judaism and women. And one woman had a question about, well, can I do such and such? And the rabbi told her that there were so many rabbis writing commandments or whatever, said just look through them and you will find one that agrees with you. Just follow that one. It made me think of all the multiple denominations. Just look through them and find one you like.
There you go. If you,
I thought they all believed the same thing, but according to this, they don't.
Yeah, I have some let's say, people that I work with that tend to be a bit higher up in the company. This doesn't happen as much as it used to since we've had a fair number of management changes, but we'll have a particular guy will ask the accounting folks, can we do such and such? And they'll say, well, no, we don't know how, we don't have that capability. Then he'll come over to my group with the IT guys and say, can we do this? You know, and we might say yes, more likely we'll say not. And then he'll go over to the auditors and ask, can we do this? And it's like, well, if you don't like the answer you get the first time, you just keep asking till you get one you do like, right? Kind of funny. But Jesus is saying your approach is wrong, your thinking is wrong, your attitude is wrong. The light that you are shining is darkness, to refer to the earlier verse. You know, well, going to the synagogue, showing up there, synagogue going, church going, if we were to think of it today. You know, I go, sometimes I'll get these political handouts or mailers to talk about how great this particular candidate is and how lousy the other one is. And sometimes it'll mention this particular person has gone to church all their life. It's like, well, that's great. I'm glad that he goes. I'm glad. I'm sure the, you know, somebody who doesn't go isn't going to announce that. He's kind of checked the box, as it were. And that's really what these guys were doing is, here's the list, and I'm going to check off each one and thus show how important I am. In verse 45, and this term here puzzles me. I need to do some more research, but one of the lawyers said to him in reply, "Teacher, when you say this, you insult us too." You know, and I don't know who these guys were separate from the Pharisees. Pharisees were already self-styled as experts in the law. Oh, so who were these guys? The super Pharisees? I'm not sure. But anyway, it was a different group, and they all associated together for this lunch. But verse 46, he said to them, "Woe to you lawyers as well, for you weigh men down with burdens hard to bear, while you yourselves will not even touch the burdens with one of your fingers. Woe to you, for you build the tombs of the prophets, and it was your fathers who killed them. So you are witnesses and approve the deeds of your fathers, because it was they who killed them, and you who build their tombs. For this reason also the wisdom of God said, I will send to them prophets and apostles, and some of them they will kill, and some of them they will persecute, so that the blood of all the prophets shed since the foundation of the world may be charged against this generation, from the blood of Abel to the blood of Zechariah, who was killed between the altar and the house of God. Yes, I tell you, it shall be charged against this generation." We have here the parallel passages that we have in Matthew 23. Matthew has grouped a lot of Jesus' sayings in certain sections, certain blocks, and then Luke has scattered them out, or Luke has them in the right order and Matthew gathered them together, or Jesus did these things and said these things a lot, or more than one occasion. We don't really know. But in Matthew 23, Jesus has a woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, you hypocrites, and you can almost hear the anger in Jesus' voice as he says these things, as he takes on the mantle of those Old Testament prophets, letting them know, you guys are not living right. Yes, Jack.
Just had a footnote here that said lawyers were experts in the Mosaic Law. So I don't know whether
Yes.
that's right or wrong. So
Well,
troublemakers
probably.
as they are presently.
Okay, I'm glad you brought it up. Okay. You know, the idea of religions, like Marilyn was saying, you know, all these denominations and all their sometimes crazy rules, you know, they make up, it kind of fades out. They make up a list and say, you need to follow these. And if you don't, then you're not one of us, you're not one of God's people, and we're going to be watching you to make sure you do them. And that's apparently what was going on with these Pharisees and lawyers and scribes and some others, is that they watched people and would be accusing them. You're not doing correctly. It's unlawful for you to be doing this. This, back to the prior section, Jesus talking about our light shining out and how we should live our lives. We are going to be on display no matter what we do, but pray that, what does he say here? Then verse 35, then watch out that the light in you is not darkness. Kind of paradoxical there, but as we shine our light out and express how we are to others, make sure it's not something in darkness. And this, if these guys were concerned about people, it's, you need to stop doing this particular thing because it hurts you, it hurts others, it reflects bad on God, as opposed to you guys missed items 17b through 32.7, part 5.5, and I've got you on my list. Anybody part of a homeowners association? Okay. Sometimes you know who those people are. Those that go about enforcing the rules. Your grass is too high. Your dog is too loud. Your house needs to be painted. Here's our long list of rules, and you ain't following them. It's like there's, you know, it's one thing to say you don't need to turn your yard into a parking lot for a bunch of dead cars, as sometimes we see. But it's another to enforce the rules with a mean spirit. And I'm after you because, not because what you're doing is wrong, but because you broke a rule. And that's what he seems to be telling these guys here. When he talks about the blood of the prophets, this type of attitude apparently had been going on for some time. And God had sent prophets. We have old books in the Old Testament where we have prophets telling them how they needed to change their lives, that these people would not listen to. They would persecute them. Sometimes they put them to death because they didn't even want to hear what they had to say. Jesus is telling them, interestingly enough, this generation, the ones that are listening to him at this very moment, all of their blood is going to be on your heads. We'll talk about that more at a later time, but specifically these guys, and it's an interesting point where Jesus does this. Let's see, verse 52. Woe to you lawyers, for you have taken away the key of knowledge. You yourselves did not enter, or this key into, I guess, enlightenment or a better life, and you hindered those who were entering. When he left there, the scribes and the Pharisees began to be very hostile and to question him closely on many subjects, plotting against him to catch him in something he might say. Jesus did not make too many friends that day. I guess we could say. Seeing the unrighteousness in their own lives, Jesus, it's one thing for a Pharisee to point the finger. I don't know if I'm pointing at anyone or not. I here in in this Brady Bunch thing we've got going here. One thing for me to do it, but it's another thing for Jesus to do it. Don't necessarily listen to me if I'm hopping on you for this or that. I have my own sins I need to answer for, sometimes daily, sometimes hourly. But it's another thing when Jesus does it, and he knows people's hearts, he knows what they're thinking, and he certainly is able to tell these guys' attitudes apart from others. Okay, thoughts about this? Their worst crime, he seems to be saying, is you're keeping yourselves out of heaven, but you're also preventing others from doing so. Yes, ma'am.
It seems sooner or later they would catch on to the fact that he knew what they were saying or what they were thinking.
Yes.
Because
Yes.
he did that, numerous examples of that he perceived their thoughts or whatever and answered them without them ever saying
Yes.
anything. And that's, if you were a little kid and you did something and your mom or dad knew what you'd done, and it's like, how did they know?
Oh yeah, yeah. And it's another thing too for a grown person to know, to read your thoughts. They know what you're thinking before you say a word. Maybe it's written on your face, but Jesus knew. We're told on multiple occasions what was in their minds, what was in their hearts, what were they thinking. So for Jesus to attack or indict these guys or pronounce woes upon them, he was able to do that and able to do that accurately and fairly. Can you imagine that Pharisee probably regretted inviting Jesus to lunch that day? There was probably some curiosity, I'm sure. Jesus doing the powerful things that he did, the great miracles, his teachings, and I'm sure they were curious. Well, they probably got a little more than they were bargained for that day.
I have a comparison that it came to my mind that lawyers that I've heard in the news recently, that, as it says here, provoke him to speak of many things, laying wait for him and seeking to catch something out of his mouth that they might accuse him, is when lawyers nowadays set legal traps, get him to talk and talk until he can find him saying something that's slightly not quite what, for example, maybe a person did a deposition and they didn't answer exactly the same way the second time, and then suddenly the guy's found himself being accused of a crime, of lying. Perjury, right? A perjury trap, that's what it's called. Yeah, that's what this reminds me of.
Yeah. Well, modern day lawyers do prep you to say, just answer the question you are asked. The best way to answer questions is yes or no. If the case may be, I don't recall, perhaps in other instances. But yes, that is something that lawyers will do to try to catch you. And when, the other side tries to prep you, they say, don't get to talking. You're not up on a soapbox. You're there to answer the questions and answer them truthfully. So, this concept of perjury trap today, if you tell the truth, you don't have to worry about that, do you? Just answer the question.
You know, something very interesting about this too is you see the vehemently, very, you know, for example, I guess the evil in them was so deep that the more that Jesus pointed out the truths, the angrier they probably became. The more, you know,
Yes.
instead of turning around and seeing the truth, it just the evil just caused them to go the opposite way, and even
Yes.
more tried to persecute him.
Okay. The story of Jonah. Um, Jonah in Hebrew, he just has 5 words for them. Translated into English, it's a few more, but Jonah is recorded as going to the city of Nineveh and saying, "Not 40 days hence, and Nineveh will be overthrown." And apparently that was enough. They changed their ways, they repented, and God did not destroy them as he had, said that he was going to do. And Jesus had more than a few words for these guys, and so he's upset earlier in chapter 11, about this is a wicked generation, that they're not going to listen to God's message at all. And just like those Old Testament prophets, these guys are going to kill God's latest prophet, as we will see and as we know. You guys know the story. In the end, they will find a way to get rid of this troublesome naysayer who is accusing them of all kinds of things. More thoughts? Chapter
They're
12.
taking his power away.
Beg your pardon?
Or he's taking their power away. I
Yes.
said,
Yes. There's a jealousy and a fear. If Jesus is coming here and he's talking in a way that enthralls the people, then what we as Pharisees or lawyers, what good are we? They're going to follow this guy instead of us. And so there's a fear for their position in the community. There's a fear for their power and respect. Jesus has taken them down more than a few pegs in this speech. So without a doubt, rather than listen to the lessons and hear what he has to say, these guys are plotting against him now. Let's find some other way to trick him up. Several years ago, and I don't remember the actors' names, but there was a movie version of Joan of Arc. And the French battling the English in the Middle Ages, and she was captured and put on trial, and they would ask her questions, and she would retort immediately with a response that put the questioners to shame, and whatnot, and did this repeatedly. And after a certain point, this went on for a while, they eventually were able to trick her into saying, do you prefer your sword or your staff more? And when you're out in battle, and well, I prefer my staff because I don't have to kill so many people, or something like that. And they found a little bitty wedge there to attack her and discredit her. That is definitely what these guys want to do. And as we see later in Luke, that's exactly what happens when Jesus comes to Jerusalem. They sort of tag team it as far as attacking Jesus. And he puts them to shame too. And at one point, they're afraid to ask him anything else. So Jesus is having none of this either. All right, more thoughts, more questions. Comments? Chapter 12, we'll go a little bit into this. Under these circumstances, after so many thousands of people, yes, you got it right, Kim. As so many thousands of people had gathered together that they were stepping on one another. I think one of the translations says trampled. He began saying to his disciples, first of all, beware of the leaven of the Pharisees, which is hypocrisy. There is nothing covered up that will not be revealed, and hidden that will not be known. Accordingly, whatever you have said in the dark will be heard in the light, and whatever you have whispered in the inner rooms will be proclaimed upon the housetops. Why does Jesus, do you think, at this point, tells them to beware of the hypocritical actions and attitudes of the Pharisees? Yes, he just got through dealing with and had a lunch there that didn't go so well with the Pharisees.
They're going out and they're going to be head to head with these guys, and he's preparing them for the things that are going to be said over and over and over again. And of course, some of them came from that background and they knew the law, and they probably are just now beginning to be aware of how hypocritical it was. I think it's a way of preparing them to be on your toes. These guys are going to be coming at you.
Okay.
And you need to stand firm.
Okay. That's probably follows somewhere into the thinking of Jesus' preparation. Notice he doesn't say, beware of the Pharisees. He says, beware of the leaven, beware of their influence, beware of their hypocrisy. It just said here in verse 1, thousands of people are beginning to gather to follow Jesus around, to see who he is, to hear what he has to say, hopefully catch a miracle, maybe get a free meal, or perhaps Jesus will do one of those spectacular things that he's talked about, that they're hoping to see, we've talked about. And yes, ma'am.
Why do they use the word leaven? I mean, that's what you use, leavening for bread, right?
Like yeast,
Some sort of a metaphor. Why leaven for hypocrisy, do you think?
Okay. Just like yeast, apparently you can put it into a small amount of it, put it into your bread dough, right, and work it in, and it spreads out and makes the bread rise. The thinking there is the Pharisees have influence of their own, and to this point, they were the ones everybody looked up to, and their influence was still there, no doubt. So when Jesus uses the yeast metaphor, the leaven metaphor, he's saying, don't not only beware of them, like Jack was saying, but be aware of their attitude, be aware of their approach, be aware of the big head that, Jesus and his followers are probably gaining a lot of fame at this point. They're right, eclipsing the Pharisees. And so don't fall for that. Don't fall for the look how important we are type of thinking.
Oh.
You know what I mean? We see this later on with James and John. They're asking, Jesus, can we, or their mother, or they different gospels say it was them or their mother, can we sit on your right and left sides in the kingdom of heaven? At the Last Supper, they're arguing still over who is the greatest among them. not including Jesus, among the disciples. Jesus is about to leave. He's about to be crucified. He has important things to teach his disciples, and they want to talk about who's the best. Who's number one in here? So Jesus says, beware of the attitude of the Pharisees, because their influence is going to seep into you and change you and give you guys the big heads. I think that's what he means by that.
So, sort of like their pomposity, their false appearances.
Yes.
Okay.
Look at how important we are. You should do what we say because we were with this Jesus guy. We were with the Messiah. And he put the Pharisees down. So maybe we're the ones in charge now, perhaps. Look at the old Al Haig maneuver there when President Reagan was shot, and we were wondering about succession and who was running the country. And old Al Haig gets up there and says, "I'm in charge here."
Charge now.
You know, the church I was in, the congregation I was worshiping at years back when all that went down, our preacher got up and he said, "Well, our 4 elders, none of them are here. I keep expecting somebody to stand up and say, 'I'm in charge,' but as a joke, but I think he's warning them, be careful of that type of attitude and thinking here. Anything that's covered up, there's nothing that will be covered up that won't be revealed. Anything that's said in secret, whispered, that won't be proclaimed from the housetops. Don't get this conspiratorial, I've got power coming to me because of my time and influence with Jesus." Okay, I've yacked on a bit too much. We have 3 minutes before our hour is up. Does anyone else have something about this section? I really enjoy digging in. I think the Gospels are high drama, better than a soap opera at times, with Jesus and his disciples and those that are around him. It's and you can learn a thing or two on the way, as it were. Okay, let's have a short prayer and then we'll be dismissed. Our Father in heaven, we thank you for so many things, for bringing us together, even if it's virtually like this, as we enjoy each other's time and fellowship, and enjoy the time you've set aside for us to gather around your word. The great gifts we have in the word and in the life of your Son and the example he has for us. Help us not to take these things for granted, but to cherish what we learn, to let it touch our lives, and indeed, may we live the life of your Son again in our own lives in all that we do. Father, bless our community, bless our nation, and bless our world as we continue to struggle with this illness, and that we would ask that you would give us all healing. Some point, take this away and help us to return to a closer fellowship with each other, and be with those who are struggling and hurting, and there are many among our number who I know have needs of various ways. Help us to find ways to minister to them in all that we do. Forgive us when we fail you. In Christ's name, amen. Thank you all. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank
See
you.
you
That
next
was
time.
nice. I'm
You
going to
betcha.
pray that I don't forget next week. So I'll try to be back.
I'll send you an email every
Oh,
week.
Okay. I've got 2 email addresses, and that's my problem, is it goes to the one I don't check. But I'm going to put that on my calendar with 5 alarms. Okay.
Email
Thank you,
me,
guys.
reply to me with the one you do want it to go to, and I'll see that it happens.
Okay.
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 All right. Thank
Good
you
to
all.
see everybody.
You too, dear. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Bye,
Bye-bye.
Larith. Bye, Algerita. Bye, Jack. Bye, Marilyn, Scott, and Alita, and John Boy. Okay,
John Boy.
that's
Bye.
how I feel on
Boy.
Marcia.